Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my trowel. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of And My Trowel, where we look at the fantastic side of archaeology and the archaeological side of fantasy. My name is Tilly.
And I'm Ash.
And today, in this very first episode, so exciting, we thought it would be good to give a little introduction to ourselves and what prompted us to start this podcast series in the first place. So, Ash, who are you? What do you do? Are you an archaeologist?
I am, yes.
That's convenient.
My name's Ash. I'm an archaeologist. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you an archaeologist, Tilly?
I'm also an archaeologist. What are the chances?
Coincidence.
So great.
We knew it.
Maybe it would be good, I guess, to say why we got into archaeology, what we do in archaeology. So do you want to go first? Give us your little background spiel.
Oh my goodness, my spiel. Yeah, I'm an archaeologist. I got into archaeology when I was really young. I always wanted to be an archaeologist. Then I went to Glasgow University to become an archaeologist. I studied there for 5 years. So I did 4 years for my undergrad and then 1 year for my master's. My specialism is artifacts, like yours. Oh, sorry, spoiler. Spoilers. I'm now actually working outside of archaeology a little bit. So I make candles for a living. And I do lots of different archaeological candles. And I sell them to gift shops and also museums, exhibitions, all that. So that's me.
Oh, excellent. Lovely little spiel. Well, indeed, I'm also an archaeologist. Also studied archaeology at undergrad level up in Aberdeen. And then, so that was 4 years. And then I did a 1-year master's, which was actually ended up being more like a 2-year master's, but we don't need to go into that, at Leiden University in the Netherlands, where I indeed specialized in material culture analysis, so artifact studies as well. And I've actually very recently finished my PhD in archaeology. Haven't actually got it yet. Maybe by the time this is released, I will have got it, in which case we'll look pretty silly. But yes, it's the defense is in October. So whenever this goes out, before or after, maybe I am Dr. Siebrecht or maybe I'm not. Or even if I have had my defense, maybe I'm still not Dr. Siebrecht. We'll see how it goes. So just finished that. So I'm actually going to start working a brand new job in September, which I'm very excited about. So I'm going to start working for a excavation company here in Germany where I live and be doing their public outreach side of things. So like online content creation and all that kind of thing, which is very exciting.
You're so busy, Tilly. You've got so many things going on.
I know. Well, at least at the start, September, I'll only be doing that. And then in January, I'll also be starting a second job. Which, and
so
maybe
another
one. We'll see how it goes. But yes. But so, Indy, we're both like artifact people. So why artifacts for you? What was it about artifacts?
I just love material culture. I just love handling artifacts, finding them. I worked as a commercial archaeologist for nearly 4 years. So finding artifacts, and especially when it's like a piece of pottery and it has a fingerprint on it. Oh God, I just love
that. Is very cool.
I love the idea of like holding something that someone hasn't held in 6,000 years. Oh, that's just my favorite bit.
Yeah, it's that feeling, right? Especially when it's something like a fingerprint or something like, because I did use-wear, and then you look at like how they were used. And my favorite traces ever were on bone. You can see they're called handling traces, and it means you can actually see literally where someone was holding an object. Like I was looking at needles, and you could see where people were holding the needle, which is just so cool.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And what's your thing that got you into material culture?
I don't know actually why I necessarily got involved in it in the beginning, because actually my original archaeological interest was in human evolution and like early Paleolithic, early modern humans and all that kind of thing. And then, somehow, I don't know what it was actually that made me interested in objects. I think there was one particular assignment we had to do in my undergrad where we had to pick an object and do like a full analysis. I've used inverted quotes yet, but like, because we couldn't do any analysis because we were just undergrads. But yeah, you had to do sort of a little research on it and propose. I think it was a proposal for like a research project based on this object. And it was just such a cool concept. Like, I think I did like a Viking bracelet or something. And then I was so excited about it. And I was really disappointed that I didn't actually get to do the research project. And I just sort of thought, this is kind of cool. This is a really nice thing. And
yeah, it is. It is cool. That sounds very cool. We had a similar one, but it was typology. And I remember everyone absolutely hated it, but I really loved it. I used to like sticking all the pictures of these brooches, different types of penannular brooches, like side by side. And I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
It really fulfilled something in me, setting everything out and organizing it. So yeah, I think I had the same sort of experience.
Are you a hoarder, like in everyday life?
Oh my God, yeah.
I think that might have a thing as well, because I definitely am.
Yeah, I have so many like objects, replicas of stuff, but also like, well, my candles. I've got a whole thing of candles now. I just can't stop. If I go to like a museum and it's like a really like cheap gift shop, I will get the tackiest thing. I just love it.
Do you have anything that you like collect? Yeah. Is there like a particular thing that you collect? You mentioned candles. Do you like collect candles or you just make them yourself? Is there something else that you have to collect?
Them, but then I got sick of doing that because I couldn't get the right candle that I wanted. So I had to make my own candles, which I think you do that too. You make your own stuff.
That's always my issue. Yeah. I'm like, I can't find the perfect thing. Fine. I'll just make it myself.
But I also go through stages of collecting stuff. Like I have a hyperfixation on something and I'll collect like stamps. I have a couple of stamps books that I really like. I've got Robin Hood stamps, lots of different stamps, and then I've got what else have I got? I've got books. I mean, I always.
Oh, I mean, that's we'll get to that. That's not collecting. That's just
education.
Survival.
I'm building
Education,
a library. Yeah. I'm actually investing in my future.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned stamps. I'm just curious. Are you the sort of person who, for example, could I send you stamps that have come to me that would look interesting, or are you the sort of collector that's like, no, I have to have received the stamps and.
Oh, no, I'll take any stamp.
Yeah? Okay.
Oh, yeah. If you have stamps and you want to send them to me, I will take them.
I mean, I do have stamps, actually, that I've been keeping because I'm like, these are quite cool stamps, but I don't really know what to do with them. So now I do.
Keep them in like little books or like on my desk. I have like my Robin Hood ones are my favourite ones. So I have them on my desk in a little like collector's edition thing.
What do I have here?
God, I sound really sad.
I have Harry Potter ones here.
I do. Oh, no, I'm not a big Harry Potter fan, unfortunately. Keep those.
No.
Oh, that's controversial, actually. People are going to be mad at me now.
Oh, well, we've started it. We're getting cancelled on the first episode.
You hate Harry Potter? What?
Okay, moving swiftly on. So
it's not Harry Potter. I don't like Harry Potter.
I like Harry Potter. So what do you like in terms of... So obviously, as we mentioned in the intro, we're looking at the fantastic side of archaeology because we're archaeologists. We're interested in archaeology. But also the archaeological side of fantasy. So what is it about fantasy that you enjoy, Ash?
I mean, it's just outside of the realms of reality, isn't it? It's escapism, pure escapism. You can imagine absolutely anything. And you can get really stuck into a lore as well that somebody else has created in a world, and you can get really, really into it.
Almost like archaeology, right? Like you're having to almost research the world, like get an idea of the context and...
Yes, exactly. Because when you're excavating something, you are somewhat world building. You're interpreting that site and what was happening. So it's the same thing when you pick up a book or you watch anything in the media that's fantasy related. You're kind of building that narrative around you, and that's why I think archaeologists love stories and storytelling, because it does go hand in hand.
Yeah. No, that's a great... I really like that idea that archaeology is world building. I'd never thought of it like that before, but it is. Like,
yeah,
they should teach that at uni.
Yeah.
Like,
we should teach it. Tilly.
Welcome to RPG, aka archaeology.
Yeah, people do like the archaeology of Skyrim and stuff. Like, it has archaeology.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and we'll get into that. Later.
But what about you? What about you?
I don't know. I think indeed it was that idea of that it's far enough removed from reality that even if there's things in it that would make me uncomfortable or make me things, and I would sort of think, but it's fine because it's a fantasy book. It's basically a way for me to bury my head in the sand and kind of ignore all the issues that are happening, which I know is a terrible thing to say. And actually, as I've got older, that was the original sort of thing. And as I've got older, I think it's the opposite. It's more, it's a way to look at the world in a different way that makes you realize the problems, but also constructs kind of almost alternate reality, like alternate options, you know, of what could be better or what could be worse or all this kind of thing. So I think that that's kind of fun. So yeah, it was always that idea. I do still like non-fantasy books as well, but I must say, I think the majority of my reading consists of either like cozy murder mysteries or like travel writing or fantasy. And the bulk is fantasy.
I can totally see that for you, though. I can see like what your interests are and then how they align to what you read, because you do write also a lot about travel and things like that too. True. And you're right. I think fantasy can tell you a lot about our own society. Like there's so many books that kind of pose questions through fantasy scenarios that can teach you a lot about the world and make you question certain structures, I think, in our world.
Which they should do as well.
Yeah,
right? Like that's what
a
good fantasy should do, in my opinion.
Yeah, they should teach you something at the end of the day. That's what books are. They're meant to tell you something, aren't they?
Yeah. It's sort of funny. So like in terms of the fantasy stuff that I like, I really do indeed like those fantasy books where actually if you took out the fantasy elements, it would still be a really good story. Like it would still work as a story. But at the same time, I also really enjoy those like big epic fantasy ones, which are very much based in the like Lord of the Rings. I mean,
the Wizard of Morgoth.
Like it's all these things, right? Like sometimes I have to admit nowadays, if I would, and I think that was just when I was younger, because I read the Lord of the Rings when I was very young. I think I was like 7 or something. I don't know. Looking back, I don't know how I managed to read the Lord of the Rings when I was that little. But I loved it. And I don't know, I just got, and it was funny. So funny story. So it was because we were on a cycling holiday and I'd taken the first one with me because I think I'd got it for my birthday or something. And I read it, absolutely loved it. So we had to go and find a bookshop to get the second one. So we went and we found a second one. And then I read that. And this was in like 2 weeks. Like I read the first 2 Lord of the Rings books when I was 7, which, Jesus. And then I read that one and I wanted to get the third one, but we were holidaying in Ireland and it was like some massive bank holiday, like religious holiday, where then every single shop is shut for like a week because it was just a really long holiday. Wow. So no bookshops were open. So I had the last week of the holiday. I didn't have the Return of the King. Like I couldn't read the third one. And I was like, oh, and anyone who's read them knows that they kind of cliffhangery. Like
you have to read the next one.
Yeah. And the films weren't out at this point. So I literally didn't know what happened. And I was, only little. And so then we got back home. And I think at that point I'd started reading another book like Famous Five or something. A bit more my age bracket. And then Mum got home from work one day and was like, look what I got. And she just, threw the Return of the King into my lap. And I was like, oh, and I was so excited. Although then she forced me to finish reading the Famous Five one before I was allowed to start reading the next one, which
it's interesting though that you didn't start with The Hobbit, which is a
right.
Book.
I read The Hobbit later. And then of course I was really like, because it's so indeed, like I think if you start with Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit seems very simple.
It does. I started at The Hobbit, so I was like, I sort of progressed into the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, makes more sense.
Yeah. So it didn't seem simple to me at the time, but then you read it again, and I think when the films came out, which we shall not talk about, when the films came out,
don't get us
then I think I read it again and I was like, it is a kid's story, and that's fine. It's good. It tells you a lot, and for a kid's story, it's amazing. I don't understand riddles, so still don't understand riddles.
But so I think that's probably how I was reading like fantasy stuff when I was little, but then I sort of got into that one. And what was your sort of first delving into fantasy?
I was thinking about this, and obviously Hobbit, but I actually think it was when I was more of a teenager that I really got into it. And I started reading PC Cast and some of her Kristen Cast kind of stuff. And it was the goddess summoning novels and the Parthenon novels as well, which were all about like going into a kind of portal
Like alternate universe type things?
Alternate universe sort of stuff, where a modern woman would get transported back into either Troy or like a Beauty and the Beast scenario or something like that, and probably like Beauty and the Beast as well. So yeah, I think that was it for me. And then I started obviously reading more sort of fantasy, but I am also a big fantasy romance person, so it fits.
So what's your current fantasy kind of genre pick? You're still more for the sort of romantic fantasy, I believe?
Yeah, I will do both. So I'll do high fantasy, but I get kind of burnt out with all the world building.
Yeah,
as much as I
that's the
love world
problem.
building.
Oh, yeah.
The first like 100 pages, I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I do tend to go for like fantasy romance. That's just me. I just really love romance. So yeah, that's my kind of genre.
Yeah, fair enough. And what's your favourite fantasy book at the moment then?
Oh gosh,
Or
my
series?
favourite at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't ask me that. There's too many. There's way too many. I'm actually trying to think. I'm looking at my bookshelf as we speak. Like, I don't know. I mean, I've got Legends and Lattes, and I still need to read that. So I'm hoping that's going to be my next one.
I love that one.
Yeah.
It was, that like got me into, I didn't realise that cozy fantasy was a genre. And now I'm like, yes, here for this.
Oh, well, that's jogged my memory. So, yeah, I do like kind of cozy fantasy, but I also like kind of more in-depth fantasy too. Anything by like Naomi Novik, I really enjoy. I think she's great. Just such a good writer. I really like Deborah Harkness as well.
Was that Discovery of Witches?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which is more like a modern fantasy because you've got
which I still haven't read. It's on my list and I have it.
So good. I love it.
Everyone keeps going on about it. I need to read it.
Yeah, and there's all like the big names as well. You know, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett and all that kind of stuff as well. So. And you love Terry Pratchett.
I love Terry Pratchett. I do.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. He's just familiar. And I started reading him when I was a teenager in high school and then worked my way through all of the novels. And then now it's just, it's one of those familiar things, right? Like if I'm having a bad day and I just need to feel good, then I'll read a Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
And I also will not apologize for the fact that throughout this whole podcast series, I am definitely going to be making many, many references to Discworld and Terry Pratchett. Anyone listening and Ash are all just going to have to deal with it.
Deal with it. Well, I think we're going to balance each other quite well. I mean, I'll just be like Lord of the Rings and you'll be, Terry Pratchett and that'll be it.
Exactly. I mean, I'm good with Lord of the Rings too, so all praise for me.
Tilly, I'm so sorry, but I think we need to take a break. One of my enchanted bookshelves has just launched an attack on the other half.
Oh.
I need to go sort that out.
Oh, yeah, that's something you need to deal with. Okay, well, once you're back, we'll be chatting a little bit more about the inspiration and format of the podcast series. So see you soon.
Bye.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Back to back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And we're back. Are the bookshelves sorted?
Yes, God, one took a chunk out of the other, though. It wasn't great.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, hopefully he heals okay. Now that we've talked a bit about who we are, what we're interested in, it might be good to spend the second half of this podcast talking about our inspiration for starting it, which actually, for me at least, it goes way, way, way back. So at some point, as I said, I'm a fan of Terry Pratchett. And I had joined this group on Facebook called the Terry Pratchett Book Club, which for any people out there who are interested in Terry Pratchett and want to join a book club, would recommend. They're a very friendly bunch. And at some point, someone had done a post basically asking, what's your represented career in Discworld? Like, who is your Discworld alternate, basically, So a lot of people were like, oh, well, I'm a librarian, so obviously it would be the librarian. And other people were like, I'm a scientist, so I guess wizard or alchemist, and like everyone was talking about it. And I was like, I'm an archaeologist. Who would be an archaeologist in the Discworld? And then I did think, actually, so yes, by the way, a little bit of a spoiler for any of the books that feature Adorabelle Dearheart, because in one of the books, she's sort of digging a lot and she works for the Golem Trust. She's this amazing character. I think she's one of my favorites. And yeah, so she does a lot of digging and she's looking for golems and she's always out hunting for artifacts and all this kind of stuff. So I guess that would be the closest thing to an archaeologist in the Discworld. But then it also got me thinking, what are other archaeologists in fantasy?
Oh, well, there's not many, actually. No. Or they're kind of like the crazed ones. The ones that are going to find this eye of something and kill everyone. And the evil scientists.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah. But, because, I don't know. Because, I mean, I remember you had at some point done something about, like, fictional archaeologists in general. So not just fantasy, but, like, fictional.
Yeah.
But what was coming up with that?
Evelyn O'Connell.
Oh.
Yeah, she came up a lot.
She's not an archaeologist.
An archaeologist, no. She's a librarian. Take that, Benbridge scholars. Exactly. She's a librarian. I mean, she's maybe early enough. Well, her father was an Egyptologist and her brother's an Egyptologist, a very bad one.
Yes.
But maybe she has archaeological kind of theory implemented in a lot of her works, and she's better than Jonathan. Yeah. So maybe she is an archaeologist, not necessarily by education, but by trade.
By experience. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people said Evelyn O'Connell. Goodness me. O'Connell. I was going to call it O'Cormac. I was like, what? That's not a name. I don't know. It's a difficult one because I think in fantasy, unless you're the evil villain, archaeologists aren't really represented as well. But usually either kind of kicking ass and like on a motorbike.
Yeah. Indiana Jones style.
Yeah, Indiana Jones style, who is kind of a fantasy kind of character. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy scenarios. I don't know about you, but when I've ever been in the field, I've never encountered a Crusader knight with the Holy Grail. So that's quite...
I think you're going on the wrong digs, Ash. Hey.
Oh, man. I knew Scotland wasn't the place. No, I love Scotland. But, so he's fantasy.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So I guess in films there's a couple. And technically I suppose with the Lara Croft ones as well. Like, yeah,
definitely.
They're
but
also fantastical. Again, isn't actually an archaeologist.
She uses Neolithic pottery sherds as bullets. Like, she's not...
Right. I don't think an archaeologist would do that.
No. We'd cry, I think. So I don't think we're going to do that. And we don't really need guns on site, usually, unless there's just like one guy that brings like pickled herring or something into the site cabin. You're like, oh, but that's about it, really.
But so, seeing as we are archaeologists and we're interested in fantasy, if you could go into any fantasy universe as an archaeologist, where would you go?
Oh my goodness, you've just opened up my world. Oh my God.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be so cool.
One of my lecturers at Aberdeen University, Charlotte Hilladal, she used to do an annual Archaeology of Middle Earth lecture where she'd give you a proper archaeological theory lecture and everything, like serious, dead serious, but set in Middle Earth. So it was like funny as well. But she did all proper archaeological. It was so cool.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Can we have her on the podcast?
Maybe. I should totally ask her.
That would be so cool. That's
she
so
would.
cool. I love that. I love like what we talked about before, like the archaeology of Skyrim and stuff. People actually diving into kind of fantasy and gaming as well.
Yeah.
To really understand the world. I think that's fantastic. If I had to choose one, I think I'd choose The Witcher. Just because there's so many different types of fantasy creatures inspired by lots of different folklore. And I think that would be fantastic. And to like follow a Witcher around and also as in like an archaeologist, but also a bit of an anthropologist, I would love that.
That would be, yeah. Oh, can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine though, doing your PhD on like Witcher, hunting methods or something, and then you have to follow this guy around. It's like, oh, for goodness sake, like, you basically be like Jaskier, but what's his name? Jaskier. Jaskier, but
or
like
Dandelion in the game.
Trying to make notes and like be scientific about things. Be like, no, don't go yet. I have to measure the
and then there's a
griffin
the griffin's just like flying over your head trying to kill you, and you're like, I'm trying to write these notes down. Stop it! I need my contact sheets.
You're blocking the sunlight. How can I get a good picture of these soil samples of the stratigraphy? You're blocking the sunlight with your massive wings.
I think that would be quite good though, because a lot of time on site, I always struggled with the sun. So like,
then it's the opposite. Then you'd be going, yes, Gerald, hold it there.
Hold right there, Gerald. I know you have to kill this griffin. Just stop, please.
Just hold it there. It's a great lighting.
That would be amazing.
Which is basically what this podcast is going to be, right?
Yeah, that's us. Yeah.
That's kind of how we decided to do it because, so for those of you listening, by the way, Ash and I are admin of a really amazing, lovely online community called the Archaeo Book Club. If you haven't joined already, please do come join us. We're a very open group. We basically read a different book every month, and our original aim was to kind of look at how archaeology is depicted in fiction. It's now expanded to include other things as well. So we do writing, we look at nonfiction, we look at all sides of things.
Lectures.
We have guest talks from different people in archaeology, in writing. Anyway, so do come check us out. We'll put the link to our little Linktree page in the show notes. But one of the things that we sort of were chatting about one day was like, wouldn't it be really fun to look at like archaeology, but through the world of fantasy? Like, what if you as an archaeologist were just thrown into the world of fantasy? Which I thought at least was a very cool thing. And luckily, Ash thought it was cool as well.
You got me. Fantasy and archaeology, it's my two things. Yeah. Combined it together.
But like you say, there's so many, and like we were talking about earlier, there's so many things that you can look at the real world at through fantasy, So surely archaeology is one of them as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think we have a lot to learn through fantasy and through archaeology, and combining them together also gets people interested in a world that they know better than our own sometimes, and is a subject that they might not know much about, or they might know a lot about, and so are kind of geeky like us and like to apply those theories to fantasy scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. So, educational and fun.
Exactly.
What more could you want? So
nothing more.
So then let's give a little teaser of how this kind of podcast is going to go. So imagine you're an archaeologist, Ash.
Which I am.
You are. That's true. Very convenient. But now let's imagine you've been transferred to a fantasy world.
Ooh. Okay, is this fantasy world like from a book, or is it just a generic kind of fantasy wizarding world?
Okay, well, let's say it can be either. So I think that some episodes might focus on a particular book, some might focus on a general fantasy concept. But let's give a bit of an example. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of Terry Pratchett. So of course I was going to wrangle away to get Terry Pratchett's Discworld into this very first episode. Ash is now regretting letting me write the script for this one.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So just to say, in the next couple of minutes, there will maybe be some spoilers for the book Making Money, written by Terry Pratchett. You have been warned. We will, by the way, try to include spoiler alerts on all of our episodes at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And if more books come up as we go through, we'll make sure to spoiler it before we talk about it. But yes, so Making Money by Terry Pratchett. Have you read it, Ash?
I have.
You have? Oh, excellent. Yeah. Awesome. So that makes this easier then. So for those of you listening who haven't read it, basically in Making Money, it's the second book in the Moist von Lipwig series, which these names, it's so funny. There's so many names in fantasy in general that sound ridiculous when you say them out loud to other people, but you're so used to them because you've been reading them for years and years and years that it doesn't really notice anymore. But anyway, it's the second book in the Moist von Lipwig series where he is put in charge of the Bank of Ankh-Morpork. As part of it, there's this whole discussion because he's basically trying to introduce the concept of banknotes instead of gold, because up until that point, it's been like gold coinage. And he's trying to persuade people that like, no, this little bit of paper is worth the same as these gold coins that you have, you know? So it's like a bit complicated for him, but he gets there. And one of the other things is that he is at this point, I can't remember what his relationship status is in this book, actually, with Adora Beldiahar, but they're together in some way.
It's kind of...
I don't think...
It's complicated.
Yes, exactly. She, as we have mentioned before, is kind of the closest thing I could think of to an archaeologist, and she's obsessed with golems. She wants to help them a lot. She wants to find golems that have been buried. She wants to give them their rights. She wants to emancipate them. So she has found a load of golems out in the desert, but they haven't been able to reach them because they're buried so deep. And one of the reasons they think they're buried so deep is because they're made of gold. So she's basically getting them to march underground all the way to Ankh-Morpork because it takes as much effort as digging them up and walking back to ground, if that makes sense. And then Moist gets all pissed off because he's like, what? I'm just trying to persuade people that gold isn't important. And then you're bringing like an army of golden golems into the city. Like, what are people going to think about that? And actually, it turns out, so again, spoiler alert, they're not golden. There's just a lot of them. And so they are made of clay, but they are still seen as very valuable. He decides to base the new currency on them because it's shown that like these are inherently valuable in themselves. So the currency can easily be based on these very useful and valuable items. I've used the word valuable a lot in this paragraph because I think the concept of value is something especially related to archaeology and objects, which is very important and a lot of people don't really think about. So if you try to think of yourself not in this case as an archaeologist, but think of yourself as, someone just visiting the golems as they're kind of digging around, how would you see them as valuable? What would be your initial impression?
Oh, if there was less of them, perhaps. If there wasn't many golems around, then I would think they were inherently valuable because of the fact that they're scarce.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Try not to be an archaeologist.
I know. Yeah. I can't. So now, as an archaeologist, you're seeing them. What is your impression now?
Yeah. My impression would be about what's the value placed upon them. So by the society itself. So what does value mean to people in that world? And are they inherently valuable or are they just seen as valuable? Is there an emotional tie to them? Lots of stuff like that. That's what I would think.
Which makes sense, I think. And indeed, I like that you talked about that idea of what it means to the people of that society, because I think that's the main point here, right? Is that we might look at them and be like, oh, but they're just clay people. Materially, they're not that valuable. But they are valuable because they are essential tools. They provide services. They do all kinds of amazing things. So they have that sense of value to the people of Ankh-Morpork that we wouldn't necessarily think of because to us, they're just clay objects and we have all this other stuff that can do those things. So why are they necessarily valuable?
Exactly, yeah. And what's the cultural value of them? The historical, archaeological context of them. Where have they come from? What do they mean to even a past society? Lots of stuff like that you'd start to question.
Yeah. No, definitely. And so I think, and this is something, so this is a very, very short, by the way, preview of the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. But we basically want to try to open your eyes about how concepts that might occur in fantasy relate to the real world and how we can then convert that into archaeology and how we see the past as well. So how would people in the past have valued objects? That would likely have differed from how we'd value objects today. And that also relates to the first question that many archaeologists get, which is... What would you say, apart from dinosaurs?
Is it ritual?
That as well. I don't know. If you're digging in the ground and someone comes up to you, what's usually the first thing they ask you?
Oh, what have you found? Is it treasure?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes, that's pretty much always the first question you get asked as an archaeologist digging in the ground is, oh, found any treasure yet? And this is, you always want to stand up and give them a lecture on the value of objects.
I actually have a really good answer to this. So a guy I used to work with, lots of people would come up to us and ask us, what's the best thing you've ever found? Have you found gold? And one of his answers was basically that he'd found a hoard of pots and pans.
Oh, that does sound cool though.
Yeah. And he was like, they're from the 1950s. There was just a lot of them and I just really enjoyed it. And they were like, okay. And you could see their faces like, oh, that's really not what I expected you to say. And then he was like, and I found a till once. There was nothing in it, but there was a till. And
I mean, that's a really cool excavation.
It's really cool. It turns out it was like one of the local like youths or something had like nicked a till and buried it in the same area. But like that was his answer, and everyone's faces was just like, what? Like, what?
But that's the thing, right? Indeed. I think most of archaeology focuses on everyday objects or even rubbish, like middens, which are one of the most excavated items, one would argue, or like features that we excavate, is literally a prehistoric rubbish pit.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's what we love. We love the rubbish.
Yeah.
There's a whole like concept even like about garbology and stuff like that. And like about looking at people's rubbish, and that's what archaeologists do. We do look at people's waste essentially. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't have archaeology if humans weren't hoarders like us, Tilly, and then just discarded stuff later on. Like
future archaeologists will be so grateful that we exist.
So grateful. Like all my stamps.
Thank goodness. Oh, this can tell us so much.
Oh my God, she's not licked a single one.
The Ashley hoard.
Yeah. But like, yeah, stuff like that. And I think people's concept of treasure and value is so different from what an archaeologist's concept of treasure and value is. Yeah. Like for me, the best thing I've ever found, or the most important thing that I've ever found, was an Iron Age village. Like I loved that. There wasn't any treasure.
Just
any
casually
gold.
Putting that out there.
Yeah, by the way, I found a whole village.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was fun.
Answer.
Yeah. The best thing we found was probably like a quernstone, and there was a cremation.
Yeah.
And that was it. You know, that was like, yes, oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
Look at all this stuff. But it was, to everyone else, it's just a lump of rocks and some kind of negative features, and people don't really like that kind of stuff. But then you think about what was going on there, and you build up that world in your mind.
The world
and
building.
You think, oh my God, this is amazing. And you know, sometimes when we were on site, we would think of names for people, like, oh, Susan lived here and Judith lived there. And Susan had a really big roundhouse and Judith did not like that she had a really big roundhouse, or something like that, you know?
Yeah. No, but that's the whole point, right? Telling the stories. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. We're going to be telling the stories, the fantasy stories, but through the eyes of two very geeky archaeologists. So on that note, that's about it, I think, for this first introductory episode of Am I Trowel. We hope that you enjoyed this first little quest into the unknown. They will get deeper as the series goes on. If, by the way, there's any suggestions that people have for an episode that they've gotten from a fantasy book, or maybe you have an archaeological concept, ethereal method, for example, that you don't understand, that maybe we can help to explain through fantasy, or maybe there's something in a book you've read that you want to find out from an archaeological perspective, just get in contact. You can email us, andmytrowel@gmail.com, or you can access us through social media, andmytrowel on Instagram. All contact info can be found in the show notes, as well as references and further reading for the points that we've discussed today. Also, Ash, I really hope you were paying attention to all my references with the Terry Pratchett universe today, because it might come in useful for your first quest in the next episode.
Oh, let me just grab my scroll. I'll make some notes.
Excellent. Well, see you soon.
Bye.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.